This is a nothing. Yes, did they play perfect? No, they still win. Yes.
What are you doing if the Celtics win the championship?
If the Celtics win championship, I might break my sobriety. I might act up.
We did it! You got him.
All the way.
Celtics versus Heat. Celtics in what?
4.
Celtics versus Knicks. Celtics in
4.
You got Celtics in 4? Hell yeah.
Use a vocab word from a couple years ago. It's mind-boggling.
That's it, GOG. Let's go. What do you think tonight?
You think I'm worried about the Warriors? I ain't worried about the
Let's
Warriors.
go, baby. 18, baby. Load up the boat.
Why would you say that?
Because
I'm not. No,
recently he's putting up games like
above our head for the players.
literally right now.
But I think when Marcus, especially Marcus, when he got traded, I think that was a wake-up call.
You think right now
Rob,
it's still New York?
I do.
And when I think of the Celtics dynasty, honestly, one of the first names that comes to my mind is actually Brad Stevens.
What is up, everybody, and welcome to Celtics Talk Weekly Postgame Live. I am your host, Seamus and tonight the Boston Celtics, they take out the Brooklyn Nets 115-113. And yes, it's only me on here tonight, but we're going to go on a 1-hour spiel about this Celtics game in Brooklyn, and we're going to talk about really some other aspects of the Boston Celtics right now within their schedule, along with the Brooklyn Nets, who are really just trudging through this NBA season. But first, initial thoughts of this game. The Celtics played 2 games in a row here after the homestand. The Celtics, of course, just on a 7-game homestand coming into these 2 road games against Miami and Brooklyn. But really the last 2 opponents for the Boston Celtics, the Nets and the Heat, they really didn't provide the Celtics much competition in both games yet. We saw 2 close games, I would say. Last night was a close game against the Miami Heat, and then tonight a fairly close game against the Brooklyn Nets. However, in both of these games for the Boston Celtics, they played opponents who did not really give the Celtics much competitive spirit out there. Yes, you can say Miami and Brooklyn, they played hard at certain points within these 2 games, but the Boston Celtics ultimately had too much talent. Their execution was too on point in these games, particularly down the stretch in the fourth quarter. And both the Heat and the Nets just did not have enough to run with the Boston Celtics. And although the Heat and the Nets stayed within the margins with the Boston Celtics, we'll look at the lead tracker here. The Celtics are doing it yet again where they grab a huge lead within the game, and they don't exactly keep it. But the Celtics, they come up with timely stops, timely buckets in both of these games, and the Celtics complete this little road back-to-back right after the homestand before coming back home, before going on a West Coast road trip. 2-0, the Celtics play the Heat and the Nets back-to-back nights, South Beach one night, fly up to Brooklyn, New York the next night, and defeat the Brooklyn Nets. Of course, that is tonight. But the Celtics, just getting into this game in its entirety, I thought the Celtics, this was 2 straight nights of the Celtics really playing through the motions, I thought, within just looking at their game in its entirety. I didn't think the Boston Celtics really played 2 whole basketball games, and you can really say something about the absences that went on both nights. Yesterday, the Boston Celtics without Kristaps Porzingis, and we'll get into him more as you see him on the top of the screen here. Kristaps Porzingis was phenomenal in his return tonight, but Kristaps Porzingis missed 9 of the last 10 games, did not play last night for the Boston Celtics, nor did Jaylen Brown play for the Celtics last night in Miami. And we saw against the Miami Heat, Jaylen Brown didn't play, nor did Kristaps Porzingis. Both played and were in the lineup tonight, yet Al Horford and Derek White went out of the lineup. And, of course, Jaylen Brown midway through this game went out of the lineup as well eventually with a lower back spasm. Not sure how real or how serious to take that injury, considering really looking at all the injuries for the Boston Celtics as of late. Are they fake injuries? Are they real injuries? We don't really know at this point in the season whether or not they were just giving JB a little bit of a rest. Maybe he had some irritation within his lower back and then went and sat on the bench. We don't exactly know. But the Celtics personnel, the main point of this is the fact the Celtics personnel was not consistent on either one of these nights. And a couple of guys certainly got a rest day at the end of the day. You look at Al Horford, the big toe on the second night of a back-to-back, that was certainly a strategy of rest for the Boston Celtics. But regardless, in both of these games, the Celtics kind of played with their food a little bit before really coming out near the end and pulling both of them out. And I'm kind of talking in a tandem here with these two ball games, looking at the Nets game and then the Heat game, because both of these games had the same vibe to them in the sense of the Celtics coming in, really getting their feet wet under them, going ahead with a big lead early on in the game. We think, okay, here comes a blowout from the Boston Celtics, but then eventually that's not exactly what transpires, not exactly what happens, as both the Heat and the Nets, they come back on the Boston Celtics and make it a game at one point in time, only for the Celtics to save themselves down the stretch. And just in this, just looking at the numbers of this ball game real quick, the Celtics had a 21-point lead. It was dwindled all the way down to 2 near the end of the fourth quarter. I should say the 21-point lead was in the second quarter. The 2-point lead, the shaving of the lead all the way down to 2. So the Nets shaved 19 points off of that Celtic lead, eventually going all the way down between the second quarter and the fourth quarter. The Nets shaved 19 points off that lead. By the midway portion of the fourth quarter, the Nets were really sitting there right next to the Boston Celtics, but just couldn't get over the hump. And we see that within this lead tracker right here. The Boston Celtics, look, there's that 21-point hump in the second quarter, nearly before half. And this is a constant theme of the Boston Celtics and their club lately, is the Celtics, they like to, in the early portion of a game, you'll see right there in the first quarter, it was going back and forth. That is not something completely out of the ordinary, but the Celtics completely explode and go for a 21-point lead and surmount a 21-point lead there late in the second. But what you see there right before half is the Celtics not closing out quarters well. And you'll see in every single quarter of this game, the Celtics really didn't close out any quarter well. You could say, sure, at the end of the fourth, the Celtics turn it up and turn it on in order to go win this game. But really looking at those dips, there's a dip before every single end of a quarter. You see it in the first quarter. You see a 5-point lead for the Boston Celtics, dips all the way down to a Nets lead before eventually the Celtics entered the second quarter with a small lead there. It was only a bucket. But then you see in right before halftime, the Celtics, they're up 21 in this game. All of a sudden, before halftime, you're talking about a game that was under 15 points. So the Celtics already right there, more than 6 points were shaved off the lead before halftime, even though the Celtics held that 21-point lead late into the second quarter. Then the third quarter, you look at that again, nearly up to a 10-point lead there. Really, I should say above a 10-point lead for the Celtics right before the fourth quarter began. And then all of a sudden, that lead goes down, goes under 10 points. So the Celtics, you just see the constant theme. And even in the fourth quarter, the Celtics go up in the fourth quarter by more than 10, up by 10 in the fourth quarter late. And that's really when you would say they closed the game out. See that little spike in the fourth quarter, late in the fourth quarter, where the Boston Celtics go up by more than 10. That was really where the Nets waved the white flag to some degree. The Celtics, they finished out the Nets. The Nets, when I say wave the white flag, I really shouldn't say that whatsoever. You knew the game was over at that point in time, but at the same time, the Nets, they fought back. They fought back and made it a 2-point game at the end. You see this game in the long run was a 2-point affair for the Boston Celtics, 115 to 113 at the end of the night. But in this lead tracker, what's fairly clear to me on this lead tracker is, number one, it looks like a lot of the lead trackers the Celtics been putting up lately on the schedule, where they go up early, they really let another team come back into a game, and they have to pull it out near the end. That's number one. But number two, the second evident thing on this lead tracker is the fact the Celtics did not close out the quarters well in this game. But it kind of goes along with the theme of the Boston Celtics as of late, where they've just really gone through the motions. I think we're back into the rhythm of the Celtics going through the motions yet again. Now, I think it's coming in a different sense than it did in January and December, because January and December, the Celtics were really every single night. Every single night, the Boston Celtics were going out there and giving us a different result. That's really what it was. On one night, they would come out there and they would try their hardest. They would execute crisply on both ends of the floor. They would come out, grab a quality win, a solid quality win in the month of January, December, and then they'd follow it up by a complete stinker. I mean, that's exactly what the Boston Celtics would do. All of a sudden, when I say the Celtics are not exactly right now, they're playing through the motions. They're not playing with their full effort. To me, it's quarter to quarter. It's a quarter to quarter basis. I mean, you could say that about January too, but that almost felt like it was becoming. I mean, that was really game to game basis, I would say. And all of a sudden, this is becoming a quarter to quarter basis type of thing where the Celtics, they really play well in the early portions of the games. And you'll see there'll be third quarters where the Celtics play well, but then they really give up that lead right before the fourth quarter. I shouldn't even say give up the lead, but really relinquishing part of the lead because a lot of these games the Celtics have substantial leads in, and then all of a sudden they're just giving away the lead once again. And that's what the Celtics did tonight, where that 21-point lead in the second quarter, 19 points shaved off the lead by the midway portion of the fourth quarter in this game. And the Celtics overall, this is the theme of the team. This has been the theme of the team lately is they go out there, they play well early, they let a team come back, they turn up the Jets somewhere in the middle portion of the third quarter, then they turn off the Jets, usually at the beginning of the fourth quarter or even before the fourth quarter, then all of a sudden down the stretch they turn on the Jets. Yet again, that's where the Celtics have been lately, and it says that whether the Celtics been doing that no matter what the opponent is, really, too. And I will say these two games for the Celtics, the Nets and the Heat, I'm just glad the Celtics came out with wins in because I really think they were going into these games thinking we're coming in here, we're winning, we're leaving. There's no other thought within the Boston Celtics mind of really coming into these games with more hype behind them in terms of the meaning of the game. So you look at the Oklahoma City game, you look at the Cleveland game, you look at the Denver game. There was more meaning to those games because those teams, Denver, Oklahoma City, Cleveland, Celtics could face any of those teams in the playoffs late in the playoffs. The Celtics aren't facing any of those teams early on in the playoffs. They're facing those teams late in the playoffs. There was more hype, there was more energy, there was more intensity, there was more of a calling for the Boston Celtics to perform well within those games, especially at home. Now you look at some of these games on the schedules, the Sixers, the Blazers, the Jazz tonight, the Brooklyn Nets. You saw the Heat the other night, who are in the 9 slot and are just in a complete and total tailspin right now. All of these teams, the Celtics, they just, to me, there's not that same intensity, there's not that same energy to these games. Yet you'll see some of the same results from the Boston Celtics, where they seem to be playing well at one portion of the game, and then other portions of the game they're just not quite playing up to par. But this game tonight, I really believe that the game tonight was it was a game between a team with a collective group of guys and a game that included. Well, let me backtrack on this real quick. This game included a group of guys facing a cohesive unit of players. And that's really what it was looking at this matchup tonight, because this game almost reminded me of the Washington game early on this season in December, where the Celtics went down to Washington, faced the Wizards. It wasn't the NBA Cup game. It was the game after the NBA Cup, about a week or two after the Celtics faced the Wizards in the NBA Cup. They faced the Wizards again in Washington. And the Celtics, they didn't quite impress in that performance. I mean, the Wizards, obviously one of the worst teams in the league, worst record this season. A lot of people expected the Celtics just to go in there and blow out the Wizards. But what happened was the Celtics went into Washington, played with their food. It was a 10-point game for most of the night. Washington would threaten. The Celtics would put the lead back up to 10, and then eventually the Celtics won by 14. And it was a little bit of yes, the Celtics won by 14, but they really didn't play their best basketball. Washington was threatening all night. Celtics didn't put them away at any singular point. It's just, they had a 10-point lead. All of a sudden the game ended. Washington kept threatening, kept threatening, kept threatening. That's what this game felt like tonight for the Boston Celtics, where the two teams out there on the floor, it was the Nets, who were playing harder than the Boston Celtics, and the Celtics, who were playing less hard than the Nets, yet they had more cohesion within their game. Their execution was more crisp, more sophisticated execution, I will say, for the Boston Celtics over the Brooklyn Nets. And within this game, I just think that if you look at the two teams and who was really out there on both rosters, and what is the identity of these two ball clubs essentially right now. The Celtics have an identity. The Nets have absolutely no identity. Their identity is here's this collection of players. We're going to play basketball on any given night here, and we're going to try to lose games because we want as great of a pick as humanly possible. I mean, the Nets earlier this season, I don't want to go too far into the Nets here, but they were a near play-in playoff team earlier this year, and they decided to sell off all their pieces thinking, okay, we're not going to be able to stick within mediocrity. And now all of a sudden the Nets are a real dumpster fire team with some of the talent they're playing out there on a nightly basis. And the Celtics, they reap the benefits of what the Nets put out there on the floor tonight, because I thought the Nets players, they're younger than the Celtics. They played harder. Okay. They're I should say, when we say younger players, let's face the fact of this. Younger players aren't as paid as the veteran players. There's an incentive to play hard if you're a young player to want to get paid. I mean, that's the whole deal of the NBA. Tonight, you had a bunch of players out there for the Brooklyn Nets who aren't paid, who aren't going to be on deals in the coming years. And some of these guys are playing hard because they don't know if they're even going to be on an NBA roster next season. That's just the fact of the matter. With some of these tanking teams, everybody thinks the tanking teams are just coming in and wanting to lose. Yes, the front office of those tanking teams want those tanking teams to lose. The coaches, the players, they don't. I mean, we saw that. Let's talk about football for one moment. Look at the Patriots this past year. I'm sure there might be some Patriots viewers on this broadcast. The Patriots, last game of the season, number one overall pick on the line. Do you think the players cared? Do you think Gerard Mayo cared? No, the Patriots went out there and won the game, sacrificed the number one overall pick, in which the front office, along with the fan base, was not very happy with. Well, that's what goes on in basketball, too. The Brooklyn Nets, they're clearly tanking, yet they still have players, and every tanking team still has players who play hard. It's just the fact of the matter of these tanking teams. They don't have a cohesive lineup, cohesive rotations that make sense together, that can really pair well together within an offense or a defense. They don't match up well defensively, or they don't really complement each other well offensively. That's usually the downfall of some of these bad teams, along with just general talent, general skill out there. But in terms of the want, these bad teams, they want to play hard because they want to stick around in the NBA. And by want, I mean these individual players on rosters, whether it's them getting paid or them just really getting on a roster for an opportunity to get paid. So the Brooklyn Nets, they had a bunch of guys who were playing hard tonight. The problem was the Celtics were more talented. The Celtics were better prepared to execute within this ball game on the offensive end of the floor specifically, and defensively as well. Now, I thought defensively tonight for the Boston Celtics, the Celtics really didn't get after it for a good portion of the night. I mean, look at the Nets shooting the three ball tonight. Looking at the percentage, 43% on the night for the Brooklyn Nets, and they shot 20 of 46. So the Brooklyn Nets shot 20 of 46 from beyond the arc tonight, at 43.5%, if I'm not mistaken, for the Brooklyn Nets. And I think that was very indicative of the Celtics defense in this one. I didn't think the defensive rotations, I didn't see that much intensity within the defensive rotations. I saw a lot of lazy closeouts of what I would term, if you were to look at them in the playoffs, look at them now, I would deem them lazy closeouts. I would think the Boston Celtics, this is definitely not the team that they're going to be come playoff time. I mean, they're facing the Brooklyn Nets tonight in Brooklyn, in New York. I mean, this is a completely different scenario. Earlier in the season, when we're seeing this in the middle of the year against teams that, we're playing garbage fire teams, right? Earlier in the year, in December and January, the Celtics would have bad games. We'd be concerned. But the concern came from the fact the Celtics were not turning it up within a month and a half stretch. I mean, there was 20 games in there where the Celtics were not turning it up consistently at all, and we never had any idea whether the Celtics would come out consistent and what type of Celtics basketball we'd see. Recently, right before All-Star break, we've seen better Celtics basketball. So tonight, I'm not exactly worried about the Boston Celtics and their effort, particularly on the defensive end of the floor. Just speaking there, because we've seen a lot of great defense out of the Boston Celtics lately. We've seen a lot of great play out of the season. Right now, tonight, I'm not going to pick them apart for them not being all there defensively for most of the night, because for one, it's the second night of a back-to-back. Last night, they just held the Miami Heat to under 100 points for the third time this season. So the Celtics and Heat, they have one more matchup on the horizon, but three times this season, the Boston Celtics and Miami Heat face. The Heat have yet to hit over 100 points on the Celtics this year. And the Celtics defense, they balled out last night in South Beach. They come up to Brooklyn. It's a little bit different of a squad, I will say, considering the personnel shifts as we talked about early on in the show. But the Celtics, they come up. They're not really there defensively the most of the night. But I'm not worried because of the scenario. They played great defensively last night. They played great defensively um, as of late, the Boston Celtics. And really, I look at this game and go, the circumstances, the second night of a back to back, shifting personnel, which that's less of an excuse, but even more so, it's the fact of the Celtics have played well. And I think in these type of games, they're going to go through the motions a little bit because they're seeing competition on the other end of the floor they're not. The Celtics are just trying to make it through the game. Let's be honest. I mean, there's 15 games left in the schedule now, 14 games left for the Boston Celtics on the schedule for the regular season. And this is a game where the Celtics, they just want to make it through with the win. They want to rest some guys, whether it's Jaylen Brown going out of the game with a back spasm, Al Horford in his toe, Derek White, getting all of those guys rest. Porzingis, of course, came back tonight. We'll talk about him more in a little bit here. But the Celtics just wanted to make it out of this game. That's the last two games have been those type of games for the Boston Celtics in its entirety. And really looking at some more numbers here tonight for the Celtics didn't really win the hustle category, in my opinion. I really look at some of these numbers tonight and I go, the Celtics, they just didn't really win some of the hustle stats. I mean, fast break points 22-2 for the Nets. So the Nets were really running in transition for most of the night. Now, points in the paint, though, this is the one stat that you would say, hey, the Boston Celtics actually did tremendously well in, is taking the ball to the hole and to the paint. This is what we wanted to see against the Oklahoma City Thunder. Didn't exactly happen in that game against OKC, but happened tonight against the Brooklyn Nets as the Boston Celtics beat the Brooklyn Nets 52-36 inside of the paint. But even so, the fast break points completely lopsided towards the Nets, and the rebounding number 45-38 in favor of Brooklyn tonight for the rebounding battle. So those are just some hustle stats. And just quickly looking at the turnovers, 7 turnovers for the Celtics tonight, 9 for the Nets. So at least you force more turnovers if you're the Boston Celtics. But just overall, I think you look at tonight's game and the Celtics, if you really, really look into all the numbers and look at the film, this game paints a picture of the Nets out hustling the Boston Celtics for a good majority of this game, winning all the hustle stats, whether it's in transition and fast break, whether it's in rebounding. The Brooklyn Nets won the hustle battle between the Nets and the Celtics. They won a lot of categories, made a lot of categories close with the Celtics in terms of the stat sheet, but the Celtics shot the ball better tonight. The Celtics simply shot the ball better, and looking at the offensive execution of both teams, this is where I really say the collection of guys scenario or comparison comes into play, because the Celtics, from the offensive end of the floor, the pick and roll game for the Boston Celtics was the difference in this game, because number one, you have Kristaps Porzingis back out there tonight. So that all of a sudden alleviates a bunch for the Boston Celtics from the standpoint of the Celtics now have their most efficient paint scorer back in the lineup, along with one of their better 3-point shooters, who is 7'3". And we saw that from Kristaps Porzingis tonight. Now only 1 of 7 from beyond the arc, but he was 9 of 16 from the field overall, and got some work in from that 2-point range. I mean, you look at the stat sheet, he was 8 of 9 from 2-point range tonight. If he was 1 of 7 from beyond the arc, he was 8 of 9 from the 2-point range. So Kristaps Porzingis back in the lineup, that gave the Celtics a lot of offensive power. But Peyton Pritchard tonight, 5 of 8 from 3. Peyton Pritchard, hey, well, let's talk about him real quick. NBA history for Peyton Pritchard tonight belongs. Let's give Peyton Pritchard his rightful due. Peyton Pritchard set the NBA record tonight for most threes made by a player in a single season off the bench. Peyton Pritchard sets the record with 219 threes made off the bench. Peyton Pritchard notched that mark tonight, going 5 of 8 from three. Peyton Pritchard was phenomenal within this game. Didn't win player spotlight, but was definitely big in the Celtics winning this game tonight. Peyton Pritchard, his shot making ability with the Celtics, you could tell. First of all, Peyton Pritchard's shot making ability with the Celtics club is it's pretty much Tatum, Pritchard, and the rest. I mean, those are the best shot makers on the Boston Celtics, just pure scorers on the C's. It's Tatum, it's Pritchard, it's the rest. But outside of even Pritchard's shot making, you could tell from Pritchard there was an extra energy from Pritchard tonight, an extra intensity from Pritchard tonight. I don't know what it was, whether it was, I don't know if Pritchard has something going on in New York tonight, in Brooklyn, if there's an event. I have no idea. The Celtics have 2 days rest. Who knows what's going on? But Peyton Pritchard, there it seemed like there's some extra motivation in Pritchard tonight. I know he plays hard every single night, but Peyton Pritchard, just in tonight's game, I thought was just extraordinarily active for most of this evening, and I thought he gave the Celtics a real nice boost for a good portion of the night. So you had Pritchard and Porzingis playing well out there, but also let's talk about some of the playmakers, Jason Tatum and Drew Holiday, because those were the two ball handlers and primary playmakers for the Boston Celtics tonight. Jason Tatum 8 assists on the night, Drew Holiday 12 assists tonight. So Drew Holiday, particularly within the last two games, really getting it going from the playmaking department, really getting himself more involved in the offense. And that's what we love to see from Drew Holiday, because we know Drew Holiday has been in the background for most of the season, really hasn't had that great of a season from the offensive end of the floor, or just a great season overall. But we know the impact of Drew Holiday on this Boston Celtics club when he is doing all the little things, whether that is setting good screens, rolling to the rim at the right times, cutting to the rim at the right times, creating space for outside shooters by going and cutting to the rim, just finishing physically at the rim, being that physical finisher against some of those smaller guards and even some of the bigger wing matchups. I will say Drew Holiday can really go up a level from his size and take on guys bigger than him. But also, you think about the shooting for Drew Holiday. If he's hitting his 3-point shot, that's a huge boost for the Celtics. That's the one thing that's really come down to the ground for Drew Holiday this year, is just 3-point wise. He's not been the same whatsoever from the field. He's not been the same whatsoever. But Drew Holiday too. Let's talk about the main facet tonight, and I'm getting to it. Here's the playmaking. When he has the ball in his hands, Drew Holiday is a smart playmaker for the Boston Celtics, and this year we haven't seen a ton of it from Drew Holiday. Yet these last two games, this is what's very encouraging about Drew Holiday, is the last two games he's involved in the Celtics offense in a way that we have not seen him involved all season long. And is that because of the injuries to some players right now, some players sitting out? Is that because Holiday is increasingly healthy? Is that because the playoffs are around the corner? It's really hard to tell, because yes, you could say, okay, some players are out, Tatum, White, when they go out of the lineup. Tatum's been in and out as of late. White's been in and out as of late. Same with Jaylen Brown. That's going to inevitably put some responsibility as a ball handler and as a playmaker onto Drew Holiday's plate. You could say that has kind of upticked his availability within the offense. But we think about his injuries as of late, the mallet finger, his shoulder impingement over All-Star break. Is Drew Holiday just finally healthy from some of these injuries now that he's maybe been dealing with for most of the season, and all of a sudden he's getting healthy at the right time, almost going into playoffs, to the point where he is now effective, or as effective as he was last year within the Celtics offense this year? That's certainly a possibility. But also the fact of the matter is the Celtics are, I just said it, they are right before the NBA playoffs. The NBA playoffs are only a couple weeks away. I mean, we are less than a month away from the NBA playoffs. Actually, I shouldn't say less than a month, because 1 month from today, so we're technically less than a month if you wanted to count the actual day. On a Saturday, 1 month from now, the NBA playoffs will be underway. And really, I think the play-in tournament might be underway. So we might have to wait a couple more days for the playoffs. I think that actually starts April 19th. But regardless, the NBA playoffs are about a month away from this current moment. And Drew Holiday, for most of the season, him and Al Horford and Kristaps Porzingis, let's face it, folks, these three players the Celtics have been putting on ice all year. Porzingis, Horford, and Holiday, they've been the three most inconsistent players in and out of the Celtics lineup. You can't say that about Derek White. You can't say that about Jaylen Brown. You can't say that about Jason Tatum. Those guys, they've been mostly consistent. Yes, they've missed some games, but those three guys have been mostly consistent. Same with Pritchard off the bench. Hauser's missed some time, but for the most part, most of the rotation has been consistently in. On the other hand, Horford, Porzingis, Holiday, long slews of time where they'll be out. Back to backs, forget about it. Al Horford, Porzingis, they don't play in this particular back to back. They haven't played in back to backs all year long, or at least the second or first stint of it, depending on which night it is. But these three players, it's evident as to why the Celtics would want to put them on ice. Horford, he's 38 years old. Who knows how much run he has left in him? Who knows what his body feels like? Who knows when his body will break down? You have to preserve him throughout the rest of the regular season if you want something out of Horford in the playoffs. Porzingis, he dealt with an injury all of last summer, rehabbing all of last summer, going into this season, dealt with the same injury for about the first 20 games, came back about 20 games into the season, Porzingis did to the lineup, and then all of a sudden he was kind of in and out, in and out, in and out, because the Celtics, they're wanting to rest him, but he's also dealing with maybe other illness, or I should say just dealt with an illness, but illnesses, sorenesses, whatever that is for Kristaps Porzingis, the Celtics, they have not hesitated to sit him down when he's needed to sit down, whether that's because of a legitimate injury or the Celtics just resting him. Same thing with Drew Holiday. Some of these injuries where we've become very conspiratorial this season when it comes to Drew Holiday or even Kristaps Porzingis. Both injuries we became conspiratorial on this program with. Are these just titles? The shoulder impingement, the viral illness, are those two injuries that are just excuses for the Celtics to rest Holiday and Porzingis for multiple weeks? Whether they were or not, Holiday and Porzingis tonight both came out there for the Celtics offense and looked incredible. Horford, of course, not out there tonight, but specifically speaking on the Drew Holiday factor, he's in that group of guys with Porzingis, Horford, and himself, where the Celtics have put him on ice all season long. However, up to this point, Drew Holiday, he's been put on ice. Is this the point where he turns up? Is this the point where Kristaps Porzingis turns up, heats up, warms up? Same thing with Al Horford. All three of these players have shown signs as of late, whether it's Drew Holiday in the last two games, whether it's Al Horford against the Cavs, the Nuggets against the Thunder, or whether it's Porzingis tonight coming back into the lineup after missing 9 of the last 10 games. All three of these players, is it their time to heat up, warm up, and get ready for the playoffs? And are we going to see some of their best basketball here of the entire season in the next couple of weeks going into the playoffs? Because that's what the Celtics want to replicate and want to see out of these players, is that those players, specifically we're talking about Drew Holiday, but Horford, Porzingis too, ramp them up all the way into the playoffs to the point where they're playing their best basketball of the season. So Drew Holiday, was really, the whole conversation was about Drew, but I'm talking about everybody here because he does go into that category with Horford and Porzingis, and it's important to talk about them as well when talking about that last aspect of Drew Holiday. But Drew Holiday has not had a great season overall. And yet now, these last two games, there's some optimism that Drew Holiday, maybe his role within the Celtics offense is expanding a little bit. And really just to rope back around onto the entire point of what I was trying to make here about the Celtics offense, because I just went on a complete tangent on Drew Holiday and other players as well. But the whole point of the Celtics offense in this game tonight against the Brooklyn Nets is the Celtics offense was just clicking and executing and finding open shots from the floor. And I thought I love the creativity of the Celtics offense tonight. And when I say creativity, I don't mean Joe Mazzulla's creativity, the coaching staff's creativity, and how guys were getting their open shots. I'm talking about the creativity from the individual players, Tatum and Holiday specifically. You can see those guys, obviously 20 assists on the night combined for Holiday and Tatum. I keep wanting to say Derek White because he's usually the guy, the guard at least, getting those assists and getting some of those points. But it's finally Drew Holiday tonight. But Drew Holiday and Tatum, they combined for 20 assists and some of their buckets as well. Jason Tatum, I believe he had over 20. He definitely had over 20 points tonight. Yeah, Jason Tatum actually had 20 points tonight. and Drew Holiday had 11. So not only did they distribute the ball, they scored it as well. And I thought in their moments where they scored the ball, Tatum was a little quieter, obviously 8 of 19 from the floor tonight, only 7, didn't really get to the free throw line that much. But Holiday, I thought he had some nice little moments in there where he made a jumper at the end of the game. He had a couple of buckets where he put it in around the rim, and I thought that Holiday and Tatum, they were very creative in how they went about their games tonight, getting guys open and of course their cells open as well. But just some of the other players on the Celtics offense tonight, we already talked about Pritchard making NBA history, and he was just a flamethrower with his intensities tonight. But Porzingis and Cornette, let's give some flowers to those guys for really rolling hard to the rim tonight, putting a presence inside the paint for the Boston Celtics. The last couple of games, specifically the Oklahoma City Thunder game, that's the biggest game we've been talking about as of late. That game was just the distribution of twos and threes in that Oklahoma City Thunder game. I don't want to know. I don't know if I want to get on a tangent here about this game entirely, but I feel like I have to. It's okay. So the thing that kind of concerns me about the Celtics and Thunder, I don't know if I should get into this point yet. Regardless, the Celtics shot 63 three-pointers against the Oklahoma City Thunder. All right. They shot 63 threes. They shot 94 shots for the entire game. And that means they took 31 attempts from 2 and 63 from 3. To me, the lopsided nature of that is just not going to work, because I understand you have to lean on threes. You want to take a volume of threes, but you also want to take a good volume of twos as well and really balance out your offense with a good amount of twos and high percentage shots, specifically around the rim. Okay. I'm not talking mid range twos. I'm not talking short corner twos. I'm talking twos around the rim. Okay. Oklahoma City got that against the Boston Celtics. The Celtics did not get that against Oklahoma City. Yet tonight, the Boston Celtics come out. They're rolling hard to the rim. Like I said, the pick and roll offense worked for the Boston Celtics tonight. It means worked for a good portion of the season, depending on the duos and who's working that offense. But guys were getting inside the paint, getting some of those easy buckets around the rim. And you see the points in the paint battle. The Celtics won the points in the paint battle tonight. Didn't win the rebounding battle, but won the points in the paint. And they won that in the half court because the fast break numbers 22-2 in favor of the Brooklyn Nets. So the Celtics, they weren't getting any points in the paint in the fast break. Sometimes those stats can go hand in hand where you see a team, oh, they're phenomenal in the fast break. Well, they're also phenomenal in points in the paint, because where are they scoring all their points on the fast break? Well, they're scoring in the paint because they're driving the ball to the rim. Those can sometimes go hand in hand in regard to stats. Well, tonight, you see those points in the paint for the Celtics clearly came in the half court, because the Celtics only had 2 fast break points the whole night to the Nets 22 on the night. And from that perspective, the Celtics, from the half court offense, they were going inside the paint and getting easy buckets at the rim, and that was part of the pick and roll. And I'll even give Kristaps Porzingis a shout out near the end of the game. There's one possession where the Celtics, it was just jacking up threes, jacking up threes, jacking up threes, and it was offensive rebounds all over the place. Celtics were grabbing a million offensive rebounds in one possession. I believe they had 4 opportunities, and they took, I believe it was 3 threes before the 4th attempt, and right before it looked like Tatum and Porzingis, they were about to pull up for another 3. Tatum had the ball at the top of the key. He got the last long rebound, and it looked as if he was going to pass to Porzingis on the perimeter, and Porzingis was just going to turn and shoot. Instead, Porzingis goes and cuts to the rim. Tatum throws him a pass. Porzingis dunks all over the Brooklyn Nets, and that was pretty much the end of the night. I really thought that play right there, late in the 4th quarter, put the game away for the Boston Celtics. I know the Nets came back, made it a 2-point game. It was scary at the end, but I wasn't really sweating the Brooklyn Nets. They were kind of doing that thing where it's like, oh, the Celtics shoot 2 free throws. Oh, we hit a 3, and they were executing it well, and it was playing in their favor. But that typically doesn't work out for a team, like we saw again. It did work out for the Brooklyn Nets down the stretch, but that play where Porzingis cuts to the rim, receives the ball from Tatum, great, phenomenal pass to the paint for Tatum, seeing Porzingis cut to the rim, and Porzingis just exploding all over the entire Nets team inside the paint. and coming up with a dunk that really I thought put this game away for the Boston Celtics. That was truly something that the Celtics needed in order to win this game. That's certainly something Celtics Nation wanted to see out of Kristaps Porzingis tonight. But see, I don't know if I want to get into Kristaps Porzingis right now or just kind of, I'm going to talk a little bit more about the Celtics offense down the stretch, and then we'll get into Kristaps. The Celtics offense down the stretch, I think this game kind of exemplified how much trust the Celtics have within their offense, because overall, we've talked about it this season. The Celtics don't really have much creativity when it comes to their offensive game, but they certainly have an identity within their offense, and they know who runs the levers within their offense. And tonight, I really thought the defense wasn't up to par for the Boston Celtics, yet the offense was. And I thought there were times of the night where the Celtics went through the motions, kind of started settling for a couple of shots out there, particularly from three. But down the stretch, I thought the Celtics, when they went into their offensive sets, I really believe within this game that made a lot of the difference for the Boston Celtics, because on one end, they weren't getting any stops. And on the other end, they were just matching the Brooklyn Nets every single time. And the Nets really never had a response for the Boston Celtics down the stretch, because the Celtics, it felt like they could get whatever bucket they wanted, whatever look they wanted from whoever they wanted, whether that was Pritchard, whether that was Holiday, whether that was Tatum, whether that was Porzingis. Down the stretch, the Celtics, it felt like they could get whatever look they wanted. Meanwhile, the Brooklyn Nets kind of felt like, when I talk about the collection of guys versus the cohesive unit of players, that's what it felt like down the stretch for the Brooklyn Nets, the collection of players. You had D'Angelo Russell out there trying to take the game over. Maxwell Lewis played well in tonight's game. You had Cam Johnson. He didn't shoot the ball particularly well, but he's, of course, involved in the Nets offense down the stretch. And it just felt like the Nets, they didn't really. The Celtics, they knew who they were going to. Okay, they knew, okay, Jason Tatum, you're handling the ball. You're either taking it downhill or you're distributing here. Holiday, you're distributing or you're taking it downhill. You're getting yourself a floater. You're getting yourself a hard-nosed layup in the paint. You're getting yourself a little mid-range jump shot. Peyton Pritchard, he's going to be somebody who's going to take those deep threes. He's going to be off the catch and shoot. We know what his job is within the offense. Porzingis, Cornette, roll to the rim, pick and roll, high pick and roll, roll to the rim. They're the putback kings. Really, Cornette is the putback king, I will say, out of those two. But the Celtics knew what they were getting out of their offense. Sam Hauser, the spot up shooter, catch and shoot guy. The Celtics knew exactly what they were getting out of their offense. Meanwhile, the Brooklyn Nets, they didn't really have roles for everybody. Who was supposed to be handling the ball down the stretch? You had D'Angelo Russell as your main ball handler. Tonight he had 8 assists. Then you have Zaire Williams, Cam Johnson, Day'Ron Sharpe, Keon Johnson, Jalen Wilson. You had Beekman, Martin, Maxwell Lewis again, as I mentioned, had a nice game. But that roster for the Brooklyn Nets, you don't really have specific roles within that roster of, where you want players to play, because you have some guys who right now, when you have a young team of guys who are not completely proven in this league, like the Brooklyn Nets, the problem that occurs is they want to do more than they're capable of. And on a bad team, when you have guys who are just really out there playing ball, everybody wants to play ball on the bad team. And everybody wants to really have their scoring opportunities, their playmaking opportunities. And all of a sudden, the breakdown of hierarchy happens within bad teams, because all of a sudden, the bad teams, they don't have a structure as to what their offense, their defense, their matching up looks like against another team, because this player wants more responsibility, even though they should slot in here. But then the player over them, they don't believe is better than them, nor should they be handling the ball. And then things just don't quite work out on bad teams, because there is a certain level of sacrifice that comes with the game of basketball to be a good basketball team. And when you have a team full of guys who are younger, not paid, they're losing games, it's harder to sacrifice when you're not paid and you're losing games, because what are you getting out of that? You're not getting paid from it, and you're not winning games. I mean, either or, you got to win games to get paid. But in that scenario, that's why bad teams, it's hard to turn it up sometimes, is that ability to sacrifice and to form the roles is not there from a bad team. Well, that's the Brooklyn Nets versus the Boston Celtics. The Celtics knew their team down the stretch on the offensive end of the floor, whereas the Brooklyn Nets, they were throwing up shots and seeing them go in. They shot 40% plus from three tonight, 23s made for the Brooklyn Nets, but it never felt like their offense had a level of cohesion that Boston Celtics offense had, nor did it feel like the Nets offense really had a specific game plan that they felt comfortable with running with their guys, with their rotation throughout most of tonight. So the Celtics within these matchups going forward for the rest of the season, that's what we're going to see a lot of. We're going to see the Hornets twice to end the year. I believe we see the Wizards again. The schedule to end the year for the Celtics is just not a pretty one whatsoever. A Utah again, but a lot of these teams, the bad teams at the bottom of the conferences, the Celtics, the way they match up with these teams, it's the Celtics who know themselves versus a bunch of these teams who they're throwing players out there to simply play these games, and a lot of the bad teams want to go into the offseason already. I mean, the 82 games, let's just get to the 82 game mark, draft lottery, draft, free agency, go into the next season, because a lot of these teams are not playing for anything at this moment in time. They're actually trying to lose games. And by doing that, they throw out lineups that don't make sense together, lineups that don't really have the talent to mesh with one another in order to go out there and consistently form a structure and an identity to go out there and win ball games. So the Celtics meeting the Nets tonight, that was the scenario for the Boston Celtics. And I will say the Celtics, they of course within this ball game down the stretch, phenomenal. Actually, let's get into this real quick, and not even real quick, because we're going to get in depth on this player. But down the stretch, the Celtics won this game. Okay, 21-point lead in the second quarter for the Boston Celtics. 19 points from that 21-point lead, shaved off the lead by the Brooklyn Nets by midway through the fourth quarter. But the Boston Celtics were able to pull it out down the stretch because of the effort of one of the Celtics big man out there, one of their five great big men on the roster, and that was Kristaps Porzingis. Our player spotlight tonight, our SeatGeek player spotlight on Celtics Talk Weekly, of course, brought to you by SeatGeek. Use the code Celtics Weekly for 20% off your first SeatGeek purchase. Do not forget to type in that code out. Check out SeatGeek, your provider of all the great seats across the sports world out there. And of course, the provider of our sponsorship for Player Spotlight, who tonight was Kristaps Porzingis. In his return to the floor, Kristaps Porzingis missed 9 of the last 10 games. Very quietly, kind of crept up there. He would, over time, it felt like, oh, Kristaps Porzingis, illness, he'll be out a couple games. All of a sudden, he was out 9 of 10 games. But tonight, Kristaps Porzingis finally comes back in the lineup. Luckily, comes back into the lineup. Scores 24 points, not just 2 rebounds, 1 block. He was a plus 13 in the plus minus category, 9 of 16 from the floor, 5 of 6 from the free throw line. Kristaps Porzingis was also 1 of 7 from 3. We don't really have to talk about that, but like I mentioned earlier, he was also 8 of 9 from 2-point range. But Kristaps Porzingis, the reason we have to talk about Kristaps Porzingis in tangent with the Celtics lineup tonight, and see Kristaps Porzingis on the top of the screen, particularly in the fourth quarter, is because Kristaps Porzingis tonight played the entirety of the fourth quarter for the Boston Celtics, played 32 minutes in his return to the floor for the Celtics, and also scored 14 of his 24 points. I believe the number's 14. Somebody could stat check me on that one. I believe it was 14 at the end of the fourth. It did not notch another point. Always have trouble in that one, writing down stats at the end of the fourth, but there's a minute or two left. Player might get an extra rebound, an extra number, whatever it might be. But regardless, Kristaps Porzingis over 10 points in the fourth quarter tonight and was huge late in this game. It seemed like for most of the night, Kristaps Porzingis didn't really have it going the way that we saw him have it going a couple weeks ago when he was really hitting his stride with the Celtics. Yet now, coming back into the lineup after this fourth quarter, Porzingis, you have to give him the player spotlight tonight just for what he did and his ability to come back onto the floor and impact the game the way he did in the fourth quarter of this ball game. 24 points, 2 rebounds, a block. 9 of 16 from the floor, Kristaps Porzingis tonight. And Porzingis over 10 points coming in that fourth quarter period. Porzingis, for part of the night, couldn't get his 3-point shot going. He was aggressive. I didn't actually think Porzingis missed a step. I think there was a lot of missed shots from Porzingis, particularly from beyond the arc tonight, that made his performance look a little bit lopsided for most of this game. But I thought for most of the night he was playing well. I thought he was playing healthy. That was very important to me. Just looking at the way he was playing, he didn't look hobbled. He didn't look slow. He didn't really look out of shape out there. He looked conditioned. I would say if the Celtics' plan was to condition Kristaps Porzingis over these past couple of days, over the past week, because we kind of speculated last post game with Griffin that Kristaps Porzingis was out of the lineup for nearly 2 weeks. It doesn't make sense for the Celtics to really hold him out 2 weeks. The conspiracy on that, I think we can throw out the door. But bringing him back, right? Porzingis coming back into the lineup. The Celtics, it's possible the Celtics wanted to ramp up Kristaps Porzingis into playing again. We thought Kristaps Porzingis against the Lakers. He apparently said yes on Twitter. We're still unconfirmed of whether that was true, what's going on there, but there were some rumors that he wanted to play against the Lakers. Didn't appear in that game, and then all of a sudden didn't appear in the next 2 games either, against the Jazz, against the Denver Nuggets. No, I'm getting these games completely out of order. Against the Thunder. The Thunder were the other game. It was the Lakers, Jazz, Thunder. Didn't play in those games, and it was amidst I want to say the Thunder game. Was it the Thunder game? It was either the Thunder or the Jazz game. I think it was the Jazz game, okay? It was the Jazz game. A lot of games lately. 82 games in the season. These kind of things happen. The Jazz game, Kristaps Porzingis tweets out that he has a viral illness, hasn't identified what it was yet, and we were all speculating here on Postgame that was terrible, and we have no idea when Kristaps Porzingis is coming back, and is he all right? What's going on with Kristaps Porzingis? What are we not being told? And we didn't know what was going on by the time the Jazz game rolled around after the Lakers game. That was last Monday, I want to say, against the Jazz. But there was some speculation that Porzingis wanted to play against the Los Angeles Lakers. The Celtics held him out the Jazz game, held him out the Thunder game, and then held him out the first night of the back-to-back last night in Miami. Brought him back tonight, but the scenario that we brought up was maybe Porzingis was getting out of the illness, right? Because he had a viral illness. We don't know what type of viral illness he had, what it affected, but maybe he was getting out of the illness mid last week against, say, the Sixers, the Blazers. The Celtics are playing those 2 teams. Maybe Porzingis is coming out of his illness at that point in time. But then, wanting to come back onto the court, the Celtics go, hold up, don't come back against the Lakers. You've been out nearly 2 weeks. We want to work you back into play. We want to ramp you up a little bit. We want to recondition you a little bit. And then all of a sudden, Kristaps Porzingis misses some time again. Misses another couple games, another 3-4 games. And then tonight you could say, was it the perfect opportunity to bring Porzingis back in the lineup? Because all of a sudden he's missed the last 2 weeks. Porzingis misses last night's game. He knew he wasn't going to play one of these 2 back-to-backs, but gets an extra day of rest yesterday on top of the huge slew of rest he's already had. And now you play this game for Kristaps Porzingis. You have 2 nights off until the Nets come back on the schedule. So this was a good game for Kristaps Porzingis to come back and kind of gauge himself in before 2 days of rest against a similar opponent, really the same opponent, on Tuesday night coming up. This game tonight, on this Saturday, Kristaps Porzingis came back into the lineup, and I thought he was spry. I really thought he came back, didn't really miss a beat. Yeah, he didn't shoot particularly well, but Porzingis, that is not – I'm not saying he's a bad shooter. I'm not saying that about Porzingis because he's a great shooter for his size, but Porzingis, if he's going to have a couple of clunky shooting games, that's to be expected out of Kristaps, the way he just fires it from deep the way he does. I mean, there's no hesitation within his shot. Some of the shots he takes, it's very surprising for a player his size to have that touch from that far away. I mean, it's truly something to behold. But Kristaps Porzingis having a bad shooting night is not out of the realm of possibilities. But everything else, him cutting to the rim, setting screens tonight, defensively, the way he was moving up and down the floor, Kristaps Porzingis to me looked healthy in this matchup, and it looked like potentially over the past week he was over that illness. He was on the bench with the Celtics in Miami. He was traveling with the team. He was practicing with the team. I think it's possible the Celtics. He was over the illness. Kristaps Porzingis was over the illness the past week, and the Celtics wanted to revamp him, recondition him back into play. And I think if that was the case, I think we saw the result of that tonight in this game against the Brooklyn Nets because Kristaps Porzingis, he didn't look like he missed a beat. It didn't really look like he was coming back from an injury whatsoever. It just looked like he was out there playing basketball the same way he had a couple weeks ago. Was he as dominant? Maybe not, and that's because of some of the shooting numbers. But in the fourth quarter, he was surely showing some of that dominance. He was the X factor for the Celtics down the stretch. I mean, some of the shots he was hitting from, of course, or I shouldn't even say the one shot he hit from beyond the arc. He was 1 of 7 tonight. I almost said the shots he hit from beyond the arc, but the one shot he hit, it was in the fourth quarter, and just his ability to roll to the rim, cut to the rim, and his screen setting ability. I think this is something the Celtics. Whoever's teaching this up in Boston, and really it's been Al Horford outside of maybe 2 seasons, but the screen setting in Boston for the past decade has been utterly elite. Some of the big men who have come through Boston, just their physical, the physical nature of themselves, and just the positioning of themselves. They're all great screen setters. I think guys like Aaron Baines, Daniel Tice, of course, still have Al Horford, Robert Williams, formerly coming through here a long time ago. Let's give a shout out because we had a Jared Sullinger reference last night. Shout out Jared Sullinger because Jared Sullinger, there was a Jared Sullinger jersey courtside at the Miami Heat Celtics game last night, according to Franco, of course. According to Franco, so just take it with a grain of salt. Just saying, Franco, our reporter here on that one. But guys, screen setters like that, dude. The Celtics have had tremendous screen setters the past decade, and Kristaps Porzingis, he's another one of those guys for the Celtics. And when I say a great screen setter, that doesn't just mean it's a physical body who can stand in there and just take a hit from a defender who's flying, trying to fly either over or under the screen or just going to hit the screen straight up. It's not just about the physicality of the screen. It's about the positioning of the screen. Kristaps Porzingis knows exactly how to position screens in order to achieve the goal he wants to achieve every single time, whether that's picking and popping off of an opportunity where Jason Tatum, Derek White, Drew Holiday, they're going around the corner, going downhill, getting the ball back to him. He knows the angles of the screens he wants to set in order to get the guys to go where he wants them to go and where they want to go ultimately too, and where he wants to go. And he's very great at manipulating the defense one way or the other, whether to switch out onto him or to not, to follow the ball handler, to follow more of himself. And Kristaps Porzingis, you really forget some of the when you have an elite player. I'm going to talk about this too. When you have an elite player who is in and out of the lineup, when you have a guy who misses a lot of time, who's an elite player, and then comes back, what's very noticeable right away, almost every single time, is just how many little things within the game of basketball that elite player affects to the point where they affect the winning of their own ball club. I mean, I think about that with Kemba Walker a couple of years ago when he was in and out of the lineup. Now, of course, he was dealing with knee soreness. He was compromised some games. It's kind of a tragic story with Kemba Walker. But at the same time, when he was in and out of the lineup, when he came back into the lineup, Kemba Walker was that player who all of a sudden on the offensive end of the floor, because defensively had his own issues, but offensively, Kemba Walker was just spectacular, whether it was the scoring game, the playmaking, the ball handling, some of the little things Kemba Walker would do to get guys open, some of the little things that Kemba Walker would do to get himself buckets. They were just, those were elite type of things that, to me, they don't get discussed within the game of basketball. Just someone's vision within the game, being able to look off a player somewhere else to pass the ball somewhere. We've seen LeBron James just perfect some of that over time. Some of the best playmakers in the game of basketball perfect that. We also see just the handle I've talked about with Kemba Walker, just the handle within his game. Some of the best ball handlers of the NBA came through the league last generation, and that's all out there. But talking about Kristaps Porzingis, he's also one of those players as well. This is the main point: is Kristaps Porzingis. There are a lot of little things within his game that are just purely elite. Whether it's the touch on the 3-point shot from far away, just his ability as a 7'3" big man to shoot the ball from as deep as he does and from anywhere as he does. I mean, really, if you're closing out late to Kristaps Porzingis, there is not a chance in the world you are contesting that 3-point shot because he's 7'3". I mean, his wingspan is an 8-foot wingspan. He's holding the ball up here. I mean, there's no way that somebody, a 6'6" defender, is going to be able to get to that ball and really contest it, really deter it, really challenge it off the catch and shoot for Kristaps Porzingis on those pick and pop opportunities or any opportunity from beyond the arc for Kristaps Porzingis. But the touch on the shot for Kristaps, we were talking about some of the angles of the screens he sets, his touch around the rim too, just his ability to turn and shoot the ball, whether it's those little baby jump hooks or just he kind of has this unorthodox way of scoring to himself around the paint when he gets the ball near the bucket, whether that's in post-up opportunities or rolling opportunities. Kristaps Porzingis, just with his length and his touch, just has that ability to get the ball into the rim from any angle out there, and that's something that's truly special within his game, and that's why Kristaps Porzingis, that's why he has to be player spotlight tonight, is all of those little things came out in the fourth quarter of this game and came out throughout tonight's game. And there were a lot of other candidates, don't get me wrong. Tatum, you could say 8 assists, 8 rebounds, 20 points tonight, had himself a solid game. He's clearly our player spotlight leader of the season. You could say Drew Holiday, he was a player spotlight last night, 12 assists on the night, 11 points. I believe he had 5 rebounds as well. Going through the list, Peyton Pritchard, 22 points tonight, 7 of 11 from the floor, 5 of 8 from 3. So you had multiple guys play well for the Boston Celtics tonight in their entirety, but I really believe that Kristaps Porzingis put the Celtics over the top. However, because of all the little things he does within the game of basketball, giving the Celtics that extra big man out there to play with Al Horford not out there tonight, and just the way he performed in the fourth quarter. I mean, Kristaps, he was not winning player spotlight up until the fourth quarter. What he did in the fourth quarter closed this game out for the Boston Celtics and really led the Celtics towards a win that could have been a loss. And in a losing scenario, it's a lot worse because we're sitting in here, we're not concerned about the Celtics, but we're sitting here going, this game was a game for the Celtics. They came out, they tried to play, they played well early, and then they just fumbled the bag and they fumbled another game down the stretch. And we're not concerned, but we're asking, how concerned are we in the Celtics doing this over and over and over again? And can they do it over and over again in the playoffs? Tonight, they put up the same trend. They put forth the same trend of going ahead, relinquishing the lead, pulling it out in the fourth quarter. Yet it doesn't really feel, since the Celtics won the game, it doesn't really feel like there needs to be concern cast over this one. And I would say recently too, you were beat by the Thunder, you're beat by the Cavs, close margins within those games. Every other game you pretty much had a problem with, and including those games, the Cavs and the Thunder game. And I'll actually exclude the Thunder game because the Thunder game, the Celtics actually didn't have a lead in. So I'll actually exclude that game. But every other game, the Celtics had a lead in, lost the lead, needed to come back at a certain point, whether that was re-establishing the lead or really coming back from a deficit, depending on what night it was. This has been a theme with the Celtics as of late, yet they still have a pristine winning record. 5-2 on that homestand, and then all of a sudden, to in their do we have here he is.
Yeah,
Here he comes. Nick Franco. I wish I had a name for that dance because it's a cool dance.
Quick little Irish jig. Just got back from the Boston bar crawl that was going on today, but was able to catch most of the game over in Boston. And what a nail biter to close out. They were able to finish out tonight's game against the Brooklyn Nets. It's one of those games that this team is just trying to get through the rest of the season and just taking it game by game, making as many adjustments as necessary for this team to get acclimated to any necessary changes they need to do. Be able to make sure that your stay ready group is ready for their opportunities if they arise within the playoffs. And just a good win that I don't expect the Celtics to pull out in other years that we've seen this team play in. And the shooting tonight, what performances from all your starters were abysmal. And
Yeah.
if there was a word to a vocab word to call them, and just being able to close out and finish off tonight's game, obviously not the most ideal situation, but it's just about being able to scratch out the W's when necessary. And tonight was one of those, and we're still on pace for what was our prediction? It was we're on the track record to 60. That's
Well,
the
you're on a track record to 62 right now, but I'm not gonna lie. I'm looking at these last two games. I'm going 62 is it's like they're playing with fire right now. Some of these bad opponents right now. I'm just saying. I know it doesn't matter because right now it's like okay, we're trying to get healthy. We're trying to play well. We're trying to maintain the 2 seed. But I look at these games and go, okay, kind of playing with the food a little bit. 62. It's like we could have been 0-2 in these last two games.
yeah, definitely.
I mean, literally, the last two games could have been 0-2. The Miami Heat last night, we had that game in control. This game was in control for most of the night too, but the Nets made it interesting down the stretch to some degree. That's the thing about these two games. It's like, okay, the Heat and the Nets, they played close to the Celtics. Down the stretch, they were closer to the Celtics. And you could say, oh, they were games, and the Celtics had to play in the fourth quarter in order to close out the games. But I didn't feel the last two games. I'm back to the feeling, Franco, of this team, even when they're not playing up to par. I just think they're going to win the game.
They're going through emotion. Yeah, just they can go into these games for the rest of the season. Up next, they have the Brooklyn Nets again, and I wouldn't be shocked if the team goes in with the half-ass effort that they did tonight. You're seeing this team going into the second half with only around 80 points. They're not scoring as efficiently as you would like them to, and that's what this team was completely based off of, is the fact that they can outscore any one of their opponents to an egregious number. And once they get to that point, you don't even have to worry about it. You can take your foot completely off the gas through the second and third and fourth quarters and allow that stay ready group to get those opportunities. But you're now seeing these guys playing a lot harder games than they need to in the final 10 minutes of these matchups. Miami Heat are a team that we can potentially see within the first round, depending on how the play-in tournament shakes out. But this Brooklyn Nets team is right now in the tank for flag boat, and we just got a YouTube video out on that covering all the teams that are candidates for that. But this is a game that you can kind of see the Celtics just trying to survive through, just being able to make sure your star players are able to come out healthy. And you can kind of see that within the game plan. When this team is, as we like to say, jacking shots, jacking left and right. And you're going to see this team doing a lot more of that through these final games, is just jacking shots left and right, just not really trying to beat teams with strategy, just with pure raw talent, being able to run up scores, being able to hopefully one of the people who are shooting these 3-pointers ends up getting the hot hand, and it becomes a little contagious for them, and they can create some momentum that way. But other than that, you're just seeing this team really cruise through the rest of the season, and that's it's a good thing. However, you do not want to see this team create a habit out of this. This is not something that you need this team to be doing when it comes down to playoff time. This shouldn't be ritual, but being able to have Kristaps Porzingis back in the lineup is such a huge bonus that this team definitely needs. We've had a few conversations if it's necessary or a key factor if Kristaps Porzingis is in this lineup, or if the Boston Celtics can win a championship with Kristaps Porzingis on the bench. And it doesn't become as much of a not it takes away a lot of the guarantee within that statement when you have Kristaps out, because you see these big men being able to exploit the Celtics perimeter or interior defense. Once you get by that perimeter, you get by Drew Holiday or Derek White or one of the Jays. It's pretty much a free lane to the paint, and teams have been able to exploit that. So that really comes down to effort and being able to match up with your mans. If you're willing to go into the paint, step up, be able to make those slides on the defensive end, being able to, if one player gets beat on the defensive end or gets beat on the defensive end, be able to have that help on ball, be able to focus on the key players and the contributors, which when you're facing a team like Brooklyn, it's a lot more spread out. They don't have the guy. Cam Thomas, I think, is a very potential great player in in the NBA, potential All Star, and I think that once they start to build a little bit more around him, he'll be able to find those types of successes and really be able to put his name out there. But until then, you just need to be able to take these guys out in one-on-one situations and not allow them to make this a close game. This is a game that should have been over in the fourth quarter.
Well, this game tonight, this is where I'm like, I don't know how to properly judge this Celtics team at this point, other than give them leeway, because they didn't play well for 2 months, okay, 2.5 months, going from mid-December to like mid-February. Mid-February, you started to see a little bit of a turnaround, maybe early February into March now. That's when the team really started to turn around. It was right before All-Star break. They went 7-1 right before All-Star break. And they came out of All-Star break 3 straight wins. And then after that, they lost 2 straight games, but then they rattled off, I believe, 5 in a row after that. So the Celtics, they played better as of late. They this is a game to me, and I think we said this against Miami too. This is a game that they would have lost in January. If it was January, I think this team would have actually lost this game. Right now, with the Celtics, I think it's a little bit different because I don't think you get a performance out of Drew Holiday in January like you got out of him
Yep.
tonight. I really don't think specifically from him. Porzingis, is he even back in the lineup if it's January, if he's dealing with this viral illness right now? I don't know. But that's where I look at, okay, I certainly have more confidence in this team right now because of the data they've just put up in front of us, whether it was before All-Star break, coming out of All-Star break. I feel more confident in the Celtics team. But then looking at the entirety of the season, you have the early portion of the season where the Celtics were just completely dominant. Okay, they started out 19-4 on the season. That was great. I mean, they were right there rivaling the Cleveland Cavaliers and the Oklahoma City Thunder. Then all of a sudden they went 10-10 in 20 games essentially, and there was some mistrust put within the Celtics roster just because of maybe their lack of depth, their lack of effort, their lack of hunger, maybe some versatility problems here and there if people aren't in the lineup or out of the lineup. But all of a sudden, Celtics turned all of that around. Derek White turned his play around. Shots started falling. The team started playing with a higher sense of cohesion and identity, especially on the offensive end of the floor. The defense became a lot more locked in, a lot more tight knit, I would say, between everybody, and that's when we saw things change. But at the same time, that stretch where we saw things change, that was a small sample size compared to the big sample size of this team playing horrendously at a 500 record. But then you also look at it and go, okay, well, this team was dominant earlier this season. So you have a dominant portion to start the season. You have a 500 portion in the middle of the year. And then you play well for about a month here, but now all of a sudden, I mean, really honing in on the last, what? I'm going to say 8 games. Going back to the homestand, so no, 9 games right now. So 9 games, right? Going back 7-game homestand plus these 2 on the road. The last 9 games, the trend has been for the Celtics team, okay, we come out, we play well, we establish a lead, and we blow it. The only 2 games where that didn't happen, that was the Philadelphia 76ers game, where the Sixers never came back within the game. It was an 18-point game at the end. It was a 20-point lead for the Celtics. Sixers lay in a bucket at the end, 18 points. Just had to remind everybody, 18 championships. So with the 18-point win against the Sixers out there. But the Sixers never come back in that one. Okay, great. And then the Thunder game, where the Celtics never really had a lead in that game at any point in time. They were the ones playing from behind for most of the game. Outside of that, in every single game, the trend has looked the same. The trend has looked like this. The lead tracker tonight, we saw it earlier in the evening, but 21-point lead for the Boston Celtics late in the second quarter, goes down under 15 before halftime, and then all of a sudden, by the time the fourth quarter rolls around, 19 points shaved off of that 21-point lead. So I look at that and go, okay, the Celtics, the one thing that gives me optimism, again, is the fact they've been playing well lately. And secondly, they've been winning these games. They won this game against the Nets tonight. They won the game the other night, or rather last night, against the Miami Heat. They won 5 games on that 7-game homestand. I mean, they're 7-2 in their last 9 games. They're winning these games. That's the bottom line. But at the same time, I'm looking at the way in which they're winning these games going, okay, there's a trend I don't exactly like here. There's a trend that this team, I love that you said it, how number one, they're just trying to get through these games now. That's part of the expectation, which makes this such a hard evaluation. But secondly, within them trying to get through these games, they're forming what looks like bad habits. It looks like they're forming bad habits. And I can't tell whether or not I should lean more on the fact that they had a dominant start of the season. They had a lull in the middle of the season that was actually expected at the beginning of the year. If you hear all the talk, everybody at the beginning of the year knew that this team probably wouldn't be as dominant, and they weren't. They had to be at some point where they weren't. There had to be at some point in the season where they weren't as dominant, and people were going to freak out. That was just always going to happen with the Celtics team. But they go through that, they play well, and now all of a sudden they're kind of building up those bad habits again that we talked about earlier this season in January. But it's still coming at the tilt of winning. So and the expectations of it. It's like, okay, we know they're going to play a little bit down to their competition in a game against the Heat on the road, in a game against the Nets on the road, after a huge homestand, after a huge game against Oklahoma City. So where in there, like, where do we exactly lean on this team right now where we go, okay, are we sold on them being that team that they were last year, and that the switch is just going to flip? Because in all these games we've seen the switch flip, whether it's been flip on or flip off. The switch is flipping. I mean, we see that. Are they going to actually flip the switch and keep it on the entire playoff run, or is that switch actually going to become a detriment to themselves, where maybe at some point in time they can't flip the switch in the playoffs, or they simply just leave it off? Because we're starting to see it on a gamely basis, but we saw it on a monthly basis just a couple of months ago, or a daily basis. And now I'm not sure where I'm leaning on the confidence of this team. I have more confidence than I had in January and the beginning of February, no doubt. But say over the last couple of weeks, I'm going, okay, beat the Cavs at Cleveland, beat the Knicks at New York. After that stretch going into All-Star break, we're thinking this team is going to go on another dominant tilt. They are back. They're competitive. They're going to win the title. They're going to go back to back. They're the favorite in the East, blah, blah, blah. Excuse me, folks. Excuse me. Holding in that cough for literally last like 2 sentences. I don't know how I got them out. But we thought after the All-Star break, okay, maybe this team is just they're still the favorites. They are still the favorites. But now I look at them and go, are they actually going to be challenged by the Cavs? Was the 2 months, or I shouldn't even say 2 months. It was 2 weeks. I mean, it's two. Let's get 2 out of the conversation. It was 3 to 4 weeks of good play and we're still winning games. But we're kind of doing it in the midst of forming a couple of bad habits that we don't like to see, trends that we don't love to see. So where exactly do you stand on the evaluation of that when it comes to the Boston Celtics? Are we at a time period where they're doing thing? Are there things they're doing? Are there things the Celtics are doing right now that are actually concerning, or is it actually to be expected what they're doing right now? And should we take more stock into the trend and the 500 ball we saw this season, or rather the dominant tilt and some of the winning they've actually done as of late?
You know, this whole entire season is almost symbolic of a post-game show or one of these games. You look at it in a quarterly basis. So, first quarter, the Celtics absolutely balling out, are winning games. And if you look at a Celtics game, it's very comparable to this season to one of these Celtics games. You can almost take any single one of them. They'll dominate throughout the first quarter. During the second quarter of the season, they turn into a 500 ball team or start to drop, let the other team start to come back. Third quarter, it seems like they made their adjustments after All-Star break. It seems like everything's starting to get back rolling. Everything's starting to look good. And then that fourth quarter comes back. And by the time the fourth quarter comes around, now you start to see those teams start to make those comebacks, start to make it a little bit closer, start to put a little bit of heat on the Celtics. And I think that's like the perfect comparison for this season is like you look at this team throughout the season, you can look at it in a smaller portion in a game where you can see like it's a much more spanned out duration of time, but you can see like this team will have these it's a game of runs with the Boston Celtics right now, and they're good enough that their worst ball is better than the Brooklyn Nets best ball, and
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it.
that's that's what was almost a perfect example of tonight. Brooklyn was putting on a great game tonight. They wanted to come out with a win. They wanted to at least squeak out one of these wins against Boston as they play them back to back. And it just seems like a lot of coasting for this team, and I think that we can feel confident in this team because we know what they're capable of, what their performances are like. But this is just like it's a weird stretch for this team because you know that they're capable of so much more, but it's when you know that they're capable of so much more, do you want to expect that out of them? I feel like the pressure should be on them I've been saying this throughout this season, to win back-to-back championships for the Boston Celtics this year, they have to be better than the team that they had on the court last year. They need to be able to improve. They need to see that consistent growth in this team, being able to feel comfortable and being able to eke out wins like they did tonight. So it's still unwavering, and like everyone's been saying, it's hard to put a lot of stock into these games, especially as we narrow down the season. There's maybe 3 or 4 more games on the schedule that might have a little highlight mark next to it, but nothing more than that. And those are just real, just kind of playoff previews, if you will. Probably the New York Knicks game, the Memphis Grizzlies game.
We can go through the end of the season schedule real quick because I think there's only going to be, like you mentioned, let's just name the games out right now. Who's actually going to be playing for something? Utah's not playing for anything.
Nope.
Portland's not playing
Nope.
for anything. Brooklyn's not playing
Nope.
for anything. Those are the next 3 games. Brooklyn's first. I accidentally skipped over them. But Sacramento, they're playing for the 8
Play-in,
to 10
maybe?
seed. Like they're playing for the 8 to 10 seed right now.
Who knows?
Sacramento.
Maybe they can light the beam once during the play-in tournament.
Yeah, That'd be cool, I guess. Zach
Sure.
LaVine, DeMar DeRozan, the patented 8 seed brothers, of course, out there, the 8 seeded duo, or 9 seed, depending on how you look at it. The Suns, they're playing to get into the play-in, but also they've been playing like their season's been over for a month. So
It's
I don't
gonna
know
be
what do you.
interesting to see what happens with them.
The Suns
But
we played twice. This I don't like when the schedule makers make us play a team twice. Like say you only play a team twice in the season. Okay, you play your division 4 times. You play your opposite conference twice. Everybody else you play either 2 or 3 times within your own conference, depending on who the matchup is, or 4 times. It's very erratic and spread out. You at least play your division 4 times. You at least play everybody twice. But say right now, the Phoenix Suns, we play them twice this season. Well, we get the Phoenix Suns March 26th and April 4th. It's like those are really close together at the end of the season with the Suns now at the 11 seed, and it's very confusing as to what the Suns are actually playing for this moment in time. They're just playing to end the season. They're playing their last games with Durant possibly. I mean, they haven't been a cohesive basketball team all year long. I mean, it probably would have been more interesting to see this team earlier in the season. Whereas a team like Milwaukee, we played Milwaukee. Our last game against Milwaukee was December 6th. So we didn't play Milwaukee after December 6th. I mean, think about December 6th. That was forever ago. And it feels like forever ago right now. I mean, that was the
right.
last time we played Milwaukee this season, period. I mean, that is with stacking up all those Milwaukee matchups. It, I would like to see us play Milwaukee at this point in the season because I think Milwaukee's a better team. I would actually say the relativity between the two teams, Milwaukee and Boston, I think at the beginning of the year, everybody was going, Milwaukee's done. Boston, still the favorite. Yep, that's what it is. And those were what those 4 games represented, or 3 games, or however many played against the Bucks. But looking at it now, I think you would go, okay, Milwaukee. If the Celtics had to face Milwaukee in the second round somehow, say the Milwaukee Bucks were the 6th seed, maybe they took on the Knicks, made the second round. Milwaukee would be a lot more formidable of opponent right now with Giannis in the lineup, Damian Lillard in the lineup, them going through the whole season with Doc Rivers, and really not a lot of depth on that team. But I'm still looking at that squad going, okay, that's a better team than they were then in October, November, and December. And the
1000%
Celtics
we didn't.
and the Celtics, I would almost say they're the worst team than they were at that point in time. I wouldn't actually say that legitimately because the Celtics, I think at this point in the season, at that point, the Celtics were winning games. They still had a lot of problems. I think right now the Celtics have mined out a couple of identity problems a little bit better than they had at that point in the year, even when they beat the Bucks, when they were winning. But back in early December, everybody was thinking the Celtics are the clear favorites. And the Bucks, they're not even going to be competition. Well, now I think the Bucks are a much more formidable
Much
team, and
more than the
and
Knicks.
we
I'll
saw
say that.
and we saw them the beginning of December was the last game, and we didn't see them the rest of the year. So I don't like when schedule makers do that. I don't know. I got into too big of a tangent off that because looking at the schedule moving forward, Brooklyn, Utah, Portland, nothing to play for. Sacramento playing for a spot in the play-in. I shouldn't even say they're playing for a
So
spot in the play-in. They're jockeying for position within the
right.
play-in. The Suns are playing for a play-in. I don't think they'll make it, but they're playing for a play-in regardless. San Antonio isn't playing for anything outside of a
Nothing.
draft pick. Memphis, they're playing for the 2 seed right now, so I think they'll have all their guys out there when we go and
That's
play at Memphis, and that's
that's
exciting
my
because
that's my dark horse team.
Memphis is the team that it feels like they're always fun, but the Celtics haven't seen a full version of Memphis since like
No,
2022. I mean,
no.
Memphis seriously every
Memphis
time,
hasn't seen a full version of themselves in
right?
that long either.
Exactly, and that's why it's like Memphis. You can never pin them down as a healthy team, which still think there's some
Oh,
concerns for that,
if we
but they'll be playing on their schedule. Miami, we saw Miami last night. I think Miami, they're just in the play-in. That's where they're slotted in, but they're not really going anywhere. I think they're
the,
like the 9-10 of the play-in in the East is going to be real brutal, and it's going to, we talked about the play-in earlier this season, whether or not they should actually have the tournament around on the NBA Cup special. We went into tournaments, we actually made a video about it. Go check it out there. But we talked about earlier this season in December, playing tournaments like this is one of the most pointless tournaments in the world. That Bulls Heat matchup 9-10 could prove that point
oh,
beyond the max because
oh,
I know the Bulls and the Heat belong nowhere near the playoffs. I mean, the
No.
Heat maybe earlier this season, but what they've done after the Jimmy Butler trade, I would have
They're-
expected them to be a little bit better, maybe in the mid-tier category. They're not even there. They're in the bad tier category. I mean, they're
There are
bad.
there are nowhere close to like 10. There are nowhere close to 10 contenders in the East. I mean, the
No.
West, the Western Conference, I can see why that play-in tournament exists. The Western Conference, those are going to be some entertaining games. Just as a basketball fan, you'll be seeing the Clippers. Let me pull up the Western Conference or the NBA standings real quick. But
Right now, you have the
you'll be
Timberwolves, you have the
potentially
Clippers,
seeing
you have
yeah.
the Mavericks, and the Kings.
Yeah, some games that you could potentially tune into if the
Excuse me,
Suns
folks.
decide to bounce back, or it's the Mavericks and the Suns jockeying for that final spot. So that's why I'll still give the Suns that chance of being able to make the play-in tournament. If I'm not sure if they're going to be able to make any noise past that, but the Mavericks are completely banged up. They're relying on Klay Thompson to be their number one player on their roster. I actually saw some type of post that if a few more injuries happen to this Mavericks roster, they might be a team that's gonna capable of potentially forfeiting a match. This is like the injuries that won't happen, but the fact that that is even a consideration that this team could potentially go through that. I mean, obviously they have their entire G League in 10-day contracts that they can call up before they even allow that. But I feel like that's a team that's going to be dropping out. But on the Eastern Conference side of things, it's really just kind of just more marketing, I guess, for these smaller teams. You
Marketing
look
is
at
crazy. Bulls,
you
the Bulls
look
every year, they just need that. I wrote this down. Yeah, I might not be able to find the note, but I wrote this down the other day. I'm like, the Bulls they just love that road team, home team play-in revenue. Like I don't I was unaware of how much the play-in revenue was apparently just for one game on the road. The
What do you think?
Bulls as the 10 seed every year or as the 9 seed too. I mean, they are a team that seriously I'm like I don't understand how this team continuously wants to go for this just the 9 or 10 seed
Well, you
every
think
year. And it's I mean, you're talking about it right now. These teams they're not contenders. They're not anywhere near contenders. They're contenders for the lottery, actually. Like the Bulls are more contenders right now, I'd say, for Cooper Flag than anything in the playoffs. And they're gonna have a shot to face the Cavs in the first round.
Yeah, and what I see, like I can see that side of the coin when it comes to the play-in tournament. This is what a lot of these teams will consider their playoff run. This is like the Chicago Bulls, and the Chicago Bulls have a genuine fan base. I'm sure their fan roots probably root back a long ways. There's a lot of diehard fans in Chicago. So when they see that the Chicago Bulls are going to be contending for a playoff seed, I'm sure that arena is going to be rocking. They're going to be able to fill up some seats, be able to get a little bit of a hope and try to push something out of it. But it's kind of pointless when it comes down to that point because you the rest of the teams, the Orlando Magic, that's a team that I would have expected a lot more out of, even though they've dealt with some awful injuries. They're a team that I had a lot of stock in when the season began. I thought
They've had the season from hell when it comes to injuries. I mean, you've already mentioned it, but the Magic, I had them as like the 2 or the 3 seed coming in this year. And I I look at them and go, look, there's nothing you could do about some of the injuries they sustained. Paulo Banchero missed a month. Franz Wagner missed a different month, kind of overlapping with Banchero. And then all of a sudden, Jalen Suggs is out for the season. I mean, that's your young core right there. Banchero, Wagner, and Suggs. This feels like 2021 for the Magic, actually, because 2020 for the Celtics, I should say, this feels like the Magic, their season this year feels like 2021 for the Celtics, not 2021 for the Magic. That was a different. They had Fournier, Nikolovic, different time period for the Magic. But the Celtics in 21, after making a playoff run in 2020, now is a lot deeper than the Magic playoff run last year. But in 2020, the Celtics didn't really expect to be. Were they contenders in 2020? It's like they were in the conference finals. They beat the Raptors. They took the Heat to 6 games. They never faced the Bucks that year, who were the favorites in the East. But the Celtics going into that season is the year after Kyrie left, and Marcus Morris and Terry Rozier, that talented 18-19 squad. Still looking at the talent of that 18-19 squad, it's
Great.
amazing how it's still crazy they only won 48 games. You look at that
Yeah.
squad and go, how did that happen? Like, that team was stacked. But 1920, the talent was mostly stripped away from that team and left
Yep.
to guys like Kemba Walker, Gordon Hayward, Tatum and Brown. Tice
I was-
started at center that year.
I was
They made the
walking around-
playoffs.
I was walking around with my Kyrie Irving jersey, but with freedom written across the back on a piece of duct tape.
Yeah.
That's a summary of the Boston Celtics 1920 season. I was
And it-
walking around with an 11 jersey that said freedom on the back.
Ennis Freedom, by the way, formerly Ennis Cantor, for those out there who don't know who we're talking about, but Ennis Freedom, his jersey, his number 13 Freedom jersey, right? I mean, he was 11 at first, but he's 13. That 13 Freedom jersey can only reside somewhere like Las Vegas Summer League. I mean, seriously, you probably don't see that jersey anywhere else outside of some random event like Summer League or some event that's probably so outlandish and not even connected to the NBA whatsoever. You just see somebody walking around, oh my God, that's an Ennis Freedom jersey out there. But the main point of this, we were talking about the Magic here on the schedule coming up, is 2021, the Celtics, they had the great playoff run in 2020. They weren't quite contenders, but they were frisky in the playoffs. That's what the Magic were last year. They're the 5 seed. They weren't contenders. They were frisky, took the Cavs to 7 games, obviously succumbed to the Cavaliers. Could have faced the Celtics in the second round if they made it through that series, but didn't. And now this year, it feels like injury after injury after injury to their young core, their young stars, and it's completely derailed their season. I mean, that's 2021 for the Celtics. It was injuries, it was inconsistent lineups, no fans, it was a short turnaround from the bubble. There were so many excuses as to why that team was not on par with the team beforehand. But that's why I have some confidence in the Magic that they'll still be there next year to go and really perform against some of the East top opponents. Now, there's going to be less confidence in the Magic actually doing that next year compared to this season. This season, everybody was ready to anoint the Magic after what happened last year. Injuries got in the way of that, but now I think next year the Magic will be there at the top again. But will people actually anticipate that? What's funny is the Magic are just going to be that team at least for 3 seasons, including next season. So last season, this season, next season, they'll surprise people every single year. Last year, they were way better than what people believed. This year, they were way worse than what people believed. And next year, people won't give them their respect and they'll be way better than people believe because likely so, they'll have a better year of health. But that game on the schedule looking ahead for the Celtics, that's where the schedule for me, I don't know how to feel. Like right now, I'm preparing myself for how to feel going into the playoffs because there's not much that can come from the next 14 games that I'm going, okay, I'm putting major stock into this for the playoffs. I mean, if the Celtics obviously go out there and they go 500 or they, have a losing record or do something crazy like that, that's going to be raising some eyebrows, I would say. I don't anticipate the Celtics to do that, but there are a lot of opponents on here the Celtics should just wipe off the floor. And even some of the opponents, the one opponent you're looking at and going, that is a quality opponent with something to play for, is the Memphis Grizzlies on the road. Outside of that, you have Sacramento, Miami, New York, Orlando. They're all playing. I should exclude New York from that conversation, but the rest of those teams are playing for play-in spots. New York, they're probably going to be locked into the 2 seed by the time we see them later on in the season, or the 3 seed.
Who knows? Maybe they lose to like the Pistons or the Hawks in the first round.
I'm just saying this right now. The NBA playoffs, people think they know what's going to happen. That never happens. Never happens. Literally never happens. I mean, last year we're like, oh, Knicks Celtics, next round.
Knicks
Oh,
Celtics is so easy to say as a prediction, though. It's just like such a
but
simple one. Boston, New York. That's what I think is coming out of the East. It doesn't matter what sport it is. Hockey, baseball, basketball. New York, Boston. Just
you
call that
don't
the
like
Eastern
Toronto. You
Conference
don't like
Finals, no
Toronto in
matter what.
hockey. Don't like Toronto and hockey. Florida and hockey in the Eastern Conference. Just saying. But I just the schedule in general. I'm not. Here's the thing. I don't know one way or the other. I don't know how much the Celtics can prove to me and how much they can take away. I think the most they can prove is just to go out and win a bunch of these games and win them in a fashion that we feel comfortable with. Even the last two games, it's like a little tough go for part of the games. Miami's in the game, Brooklyn's in the game, but I never felt the games were out of control. I never felt like the Celtics were playing terribly, and I never felt like at the end of the game the Celtics were actually I'm not going to pull it out. Quite frankly, the last two games, I thought 100% in the fourth quarter the Celtics were going to pull it out. I never felt like at a point in time, oh, the Celtics, they're gonna roll over and die in this game. We've seen that in January. We felt that in January. It's March. It's a different month. It's a different portion of the season. They're doing it differently now. There's a different intent around this ball club, but but that's where I just look at the schedule and I go, what are they actually going to do and prove to us moving forward? Because there's a lot of just terrible, crappy opponents on the schedule not playing for anything. There's maybe one or two that are playing for something out there. And even in those games, will the Celtics be the ones who actually come up and show up to the competition? I don't really know. So just moving ahead, I'm very I'm very weary on how to evaluate this team. I still think they're one of the toughest teams, easily the Celtics, to beat 4 out of 7 times. But after we saw that Oklahoma City game, it's like, yeah, there are teams out there like at this point in the year I'm looking at right now because earlier this season, I look at a team like Cleveland, Oklahoma City, I go, they're playing balls to the wall. They haven't won anything. They're playing heavily on every given. They're playing hard and heavy on every single night of the NBA regular season. Celtics aren't doing that. They're just not that team. They already won the title. They're older. They're veteran led. They have some 35-plus-year-old players playing within their rotation. They're not going ahead and trying to win every single game, playing their hardest, like OKC and like Cleveland. And when the playoffs come around, and I even think this could still be the scenario with these teams is Cleveland and Oklahoma City at some point in time they're going to peter out and kind of blow their gasket a little bit in the playoffs because they realize, oh, wait, the playoffs, this is a whole different level of intensity within the playoffs, offensively and defensively. We've used up a lot of gas from the regular season. Are we going to be able to make it through 4 rounds? Whereas this other team, the Celtics, they've been preserving their gas tank all year. They're experienced. They're a high IQ basketball team, very talented basketball team. Is that actually the team that's just going to run ahead of everybody come playoff time? That's the scenario that I was thinking earlier this season. That's still the scenario I'm thinking of right now. But I do look at OKC and Cleveland, specifically OKC, from what the 2 games we saw against them this season. I think Cleveland we have a handle on to some degree, but OKC, it's like, man, we were
I'll say I'm
dominated in the second
intimidated.
half.
Yeah,
We
I'm
were dominated
intimidated.
in that game the other night. I mean, it was close the other night, but to me, we were playing from behind. We were playing like the Nets. We were playing like the Heat last 2 nights against the Celtics. I mean, we were playing from behind against that Oklahoma City Thunder team. And I do look at the Thunder specifically and go, wow, okay, that's a young team and it's an inexperienced team compared to some other teams out west, but that's a team that's a threat to the Celtics. I mean, point blank, that's a team that's a threat. And I don't know if I trust the Thunder's ability to just go the whole season and just run through everybody and play hard every single game, or if I trust the Celtics kind of pacing themselves, not playing well for parts of the season, but then eventually turning it up near the end of the calendar. I don't. That's where I'm when I just evaluate all these teams. Where do I slot? I mean, in terms of record, you slot the Celtics in third with the Cavs and the Thunder. I mean, you go Cavs, Thunder, Thunder, Cavs, whatever order you want to go in, and then you go the Celtics. But there's a outside of just ranking the records. I mean, a lot of people still believe in the Celtics over the Cavs and the Thunder, but I don't know whether or not to put those teams you have to put them on the same tier.
Yeah.
You have to. But I don't know who I trust actually more come playoff time. Do I trust the teams who have been just great all season long, who have never skipped a beat? Or do I trust the Celtics team who has the experience of the past, the talent right now, maybe the higher IQ than these teams, but they've been preserving their tank and the results have been a little bit mixed to the point where we don't quite know what we're getting from them on a nightly basis. I would say right now that's shed from the team a little bit, but at the same time, we're still seeing these games where we don't know what we're going to get out of them quarter to quarter. Are we going to get a dominant quarter out of them? Or are we going to get a lackadaisical quarter out of the Boston Celtics? We don't really know still at this point in time. And that's what just makes me, I'm not concerned about the Celtics, but it gives me a little, raises a little bit of an eyebrow on me that I go, okay, the Celtics, they're up and down. These teams aren't up and down. Which team within this tier, right? Because I think the tier at the top, it's OKC, Cleveland, Boston.
Throw the
Who
Nuggets
do I
in there.
trust more? Who do I actually trust more come playoff time? And let me take out my Celtics bias when it comes to this. Who do I trust more? Right now, I don't know.
I would trust the Thunder. Well, between Cavs and Thunder, I would trust the Thunder a little bit more, just because they're a lot more of in a foreign territory for the Boston Celtics. The Celtics don't have as much film on the Thunder, haven't done as much preparation. They don't have to write up too much schematics when it comes down to those games. They don't have a poised game book for the Oklahoma City Thunder. How are we going to take Shai Gilgeous-Alexander out of the game? How are we going to avoid sending him to the free throw line? How are we going to be able to limit the transition that they are able to run in Oklahoma City? So that's where I think Oklahoma City has that advantage on the Celtics, especially with how well coached they are by Mark Daigneault. Whenever they're facing off with the Celtics, you can tell that it's something, they're bringing something new to the table when they're facing up against Boston in the past few games. Whether it's new plays, being able to find newer looks, being able to exploit some weaknesses within this Boston Celtics team that other teams aren't capable of exposing. Obviously, those will exist, but do other teams have the talent to make those noticeable, like the Celtics perimeter defense, or not perimeter, interior defense on a night when Kristaps Porzingis is out of the lineup? Not too many teams can take full advantage of that, but the Thunder have easily shown that they can. So that's where I really have started to like my take that I had a few games ago that I made during the Thunder game. Was I like to compare the Oklahoma City Thunder of this year to the 2021-2022 Celtics, where you have that amazing depth that they do. The Oklahoma City Thunder are probably a 8 or 9 to 10 person deep team that you can trust any of those guys to slot into the starting rotation and not hinder their performance and continue to contribute. And then you just don't see that experience when it comes down to playoff time. And now it's weird to say that the Celtics are kind of going to be going into that Warriors-esque role where the Celtics have been to the NBA Finals before. They have lost an NBA Finals before, which is incredibly huge. And more importantly, the Celtics have won an NBA championship. So they know both sides of that totem pole. And I think the Thunder are going to have, I know this Oklahoma City Thunder team are going to turn into a great team at some point, potentially going to be the Celtics' upcoming rival for years to come. But I think the Oklahoma City Thunder are still a heartbreak or two away from becoming that championship caliber team. I think they just need to continue to have those adages, and they're still a team that has more draft picks than they're even capable of drafting. So they're bound to make another move, which is like the Drew Holiday, Kristaps Porzingis moves that you saw the Celtics make before last season's championship run. So they can still add a few pieces to that lineup. And then looking over at Cleveland, there we we know what to expect out of Cleveland, and that's not saying that if we do get Cleveland, they're an open book. We know what to expect, which is a really, really challenging, tough, hard fought game where Cleveland is very talented in the front and back court with the double big lineup, which could exploit the Celtics, and they've utilized to exploit the Celtics at some points this season. But do I have faith that Darius Garland and the rest of that crew will be able to pull out 7 game or 4 games in Boston or in Cleveland? No, I think that they'll the upset factor will probably go away. I think there's definitely a chance that the series looks interesting and there's that game 7 or potentially that game 6 that you think that the Celtics might be under circumstance to fall under upset, but I feel like this team has just enough talent around it that we haven't even seen them at 100% this season, which is kind of a scary thought when it comes to this Boston Celtics. We've seen some inconsistent play as of now, and what you can expect from the rest of these games is a lot of nonchalant play, a lot of taking threes, just relying on the pure talent that they have, not the pure effort that they have to close out these games. But once they start applying themselves and playing the Celtics basketball that we've grown to know and love, that hardcore defense, being able to create that momentum to a point where the TD Garden is rocking and the other team has no other choice to call the timeout and start to wave a white flag. We haven't even seen that tonality come out of the Celtics yet. So I feel like there's a whole nother echelon that the Celtics can bring their play up to. And it's very obvious that it's kind of being masked at this point for them. And I would like to see them utilize that more, but for these next few games, all we can really look for is these rotational players to get acclimated to minutes. And you see the Baylor Shiremans getting some rotational minutes like tonight. Or who knows, we've seen a lot of great performances out of our rotational players as well. Sam Hauser having a 25 plus point game. You see Peyton Pritchard have 25 plus point games. That is not something that you can get used to, and that's definitely something that isn't in the Celtics game plan. They're not expecting these guys to have these great games. They're not writing down on the whiteboard before they walk out of the tunnel, hey, Pritchard, this is your game tonight. Hauser, this is your game tonight. It's almost up to the taking for anyone at this point, and it's just the momentum builders. And you even look to like the Jordan Walshes and another player that I will continue to and to promote on this brand until the regular season ends is I want to see. I know we've seen some poor performance out of them, but the fact that Xavier Tillman still has a roster spot means that we need to be able to get some type of contribution from him. So it's just being able to find out where that role is. Obviously, there's a chance that is a lost cause for the Boston Celtics, and
A chance. I
Hey,
don't think we're seeing anything out of Xavier Tillman the rest of the year. I
we got
highly doubt it.
left.
I
Who
hi-
knows if he has all it takes is one of those games that he gets 3 or 4 shot attempts and 2 of them fall in, that can only lead to momentum rolling. It's just being able to have anyone who is wearing a green or white jersey be ready for playoffs.
That's true. But I liked a couple of things you said in there. Number one, you said the Oklahoma City Thunder, they're about a heartbreak or two away from really breaking through. And I think that's typically the timeline, the path,
We
the
know.
trajectory that those young teams take. I think that's
We know
everybody's
it.
awareness. That's just everybody's awareness when it comes to right now. It's the Thunder, it's the Cavs too, but it's any young team. I mean, the Celtics, we were riding high in 2022 thinking this team was going to go all the way, and then all of a sudden the Warriors stopped us in our tracks. I mean, right after a great the East was a gauntlet that year. The Celtics faced the Nets in round 1 with KD and Kyrie. Round 2 faced Giannis, of course, no Middleton in that series, but Bucks still had Drew Holiday at that point in time, beat the Bucks in 7 games, beat the Heat in 7 games, had to win a game 7 against Jimmy Butler and the Heat on the Miami floor. We just saw last night, but back in 2022, that's what the Celtics had to do in order to go to the finals. And then in the finals, the more experienced team in the Golden State Warriors, who might have been the lesser talented team, although the more experienced team with the deeper playbook and with the more I would say refined X's and O's, beat the Boston Celtics. And they, too, you look at the competition on the way to the finals that season, the Warriors just had an easier path all the way from round 1 into the final and into the finals. I mean, round 1 was the Denver Nuggets without Jamal Murray that year. Round 2, Ja Morant went out in that round. They only took the Grizzlies to 6 games. Round 1 was a sweep for the Warriors. Was a sweep for the Celtics too, but a little bit tougher of a series against the Nets than the Warriors had against the Nuggets. But then in the conference finals, the Warriors took out the Dallas Mavericks, who were not even supposed to be there. They upset the Phoenix Suns on the Suns' home floor the round before. The Suns were the 64-win team that was supposed to be in the conference finals, and that's why we always have to, kind of back up and look at these teams because that does happen in NBA history quite frequently. I mean, a couple of years ago, the Phoenix Suns, they won 64 games. That's going to be around the game. That's going to be around the number of games that the Thunder and the Cavs take away this season, if not a couple more than that number. But that doesn't mean they can't be beat by a 4 or 5 seed in the second round. Obviously, the Dallas Mavericks this year completely falling out of that equation. But that year, the Phoenix Suns, it was the Suns' year. It was the Suns' title. They were supposed to go to the conference finals, and they were supposed to go to the finals, and the Warriors and the Suns out west. And that was the Western Conference Finals that everybody was looking at, yet it was the Mavericks and the Warriors on the way to the finals, and the Celtics. They were the team that eventually were taken out by the Golden State Warriors because the Suns were not there to face the Warriors. The Warriors faced easier competition, then all of a sudden the tanks ran dry for the Celtics in the finals, where the Warriors still had a little bit extra of a tank left. That's where the Celtics are right now, where they're preserving their tank for later in the season. Some of these other teams, they're running their tank dry, and that's why some of these people out here believe that the Cavs and the Thunder, they might not have as much experience or as much of a tank when it comes to the postseason as teams like the Nuggets, the Lakers, the Celtics, teams who have all won titles this decade. Even the Warriors want to throw them out with Jimmy Butler as well, but just all the we know in NBA history, the young teams, it just takes a little bit of time. And there's some outliers in NBA history who break through and do it early, but that's few and far between. That could be this Oklahoma City Thunder team, but we really have to see it in order to believe it first, because otherwise the history is quite robust in terms of young teams needing to go through that heartbreak, like you were mentioning. So I love that you said that within there, but you also started to talk about the Boston Celtics and their games as of late and going ahead. What I thought was actually impressive about tonight's game for the Boston Celtics is the all-around nature in which the points came from the Celtics tonight. Because if you look at the score sheet, first you have Jason Tatum with 20 points on the night. He led the way for the Boston Celtics, and why does it say he only has 5 points on my stat sheet? I'm pretty sure he has 20. Jason Tatum, he had 20 points on the night. I don't know. It was like showing me like the first quarter box score. I don't know. I go down to the box score. I'm like, 5. No, I'm pretty sure Jason Tatum had more than 5 points tonight. But Jason Tatum had 20 points tonight. Kristaps Porzingis led the way with 24 points. 22 came from Pritchard. So you had three guys in the 20-point range tonight for the Celtics. Number one, that's great for the team in general. But then you also had three guys, Sam Hauser, 11 points, Holiday, 11 points, and Cornette, 10 points. Those are three guys also in double figures. So you have six guys in double figures, but then you also have Jaylen Brown, who actually went out in this game. If he played the entirety of this game, he would also have been in double figures. He had 8 points, shot 3 of 8 on the night, only played 24 minutes. But that's essentially 7 players in double figures right there. You had Shireman 3 points, Cato was 6 points as well. But you just see the all-around nature of the game for the Celtics. That's what I love to see from this particular basketball team, because we do see nights where Tatum goes insane, Brown goes insane. You might see Pritchard go insane. We saw a game where Hauser went insane this past week. Same with Derek White and Peyton Pritchard. Multiple guys can really get it up on this roster. Porzingis as well. But some of these guys have tremendous individual performances, and yet the team doesn't feel like they always play cohesively to a point where they're blowing out the other opponent. It seems like, oh, yeah, one guy's going off, but the rest of the team has 5 points right now. Like, oh, great, Tatum has 40, but everybody else is combining for a grand total of 19 points between the rest of the 6 players who are out there within a 7-man rotation. And I see that with the Celtics, and I can see that as a problem sometimes for the C's. But what we really like to see is the Celtics playing that all-around style of basketball, in which they did tonight. The points came from a distributed effort from 7 different guys, really. If you included Jaylen Brown in the double figures category, 7 different guys were in double figures. Technically 6. Jaylen Brown, like I said, went out of the game. But that to me is impressive for the Celtics, and I need to see more of that out of the team moving forward to gain more and more confidence. That's the one thing they could really do is the Celtics. Of course, they could win games. Number one, win games. That's going to impress me down the stretch. Be in these games, handle the games. That's number one. But secondly, do it in a fashion in which we can feel comfortable with at the end and take a silver lining, a positive out of. Tonight, the game was close, 2-point game. Some people are going to throw a hissy fit over it, but you look at the stat sheet, the Celtics, the Nets, the Celtics didn't really win the hustle stats. The Nets did. The Celtics had all these guys in double figures. They played an all-around game. Defensively, it wasn't great all night, but the Celtics, they created the looks they wanted to create, and they knocked down shots. And they came away with this win late in the fourth quarter when they really needed to, played timely basketball like they did last night. And I walk away from this game, and the last 2 games specifically, from the Heat contest and tonight's contest against the Nets, and I go, they weren't pretty affairs whatsoever, but it's nothing I didn't expect out of the Celtics from their
No.
recent schedule. And I still, with the way they won these games, they're still showing me a lot of positives that I think will be enhanced when the competition is a little bit more stiff come playoff time.
Yeah, and that's what we've really. I think we've really grown to that point where we know that there's going to be at some point some ugly losses. Who knows? Maybe the Celtics go into the TD Garden on Tuesday and completely fumble this game against the Brooklyn Nets. And I think that it's just like not something that really you can take too much into consideration with those losses. Obviously, we'll still be here on Celtics Talk Weekly, nitpicking through the entire game and giving you your analysts. So be sure to be back for that. But we're gonna know exactly what we've seen, and it's gonna be more of the same than before. We're not gonna be seeing any new game plans. We're not gonna be seeing anything new to the lineups. We're not gonna be seeing anything new to the rotations. We're gonna be seeing, if anything, a lot more minute restrictions, a lot more rest. You're gonna see players like Jaylen Brown having nights that he's only playing for 25 minutes and coming out of the game. Hopefully, the Celtics can get better at what they were so good at last year, which was getting those leads within that first half, and during that third quarter being able to get it to a point where the other team begins to wave the white flag. I think the Celtics should start playing their starters in their rotation until you see the other team be like, all right, it's time to sit our star players. We don't have any chance of coming back. That's when the Celtics need to start being able to be like, all right, let's throw in the stay ready group just to close this one out, and we see hopefully start to see better performances out of them, so that you can see these Celtics closing out a 20-point win after all their starters are pulled from the game in the fourth quarter. So just being able to get those types of games out of your bench players will also create a lot of confidence when it comes down to playoffs. And we know how important that confidence is. You look at last year's playoff and championship run hero, Peyton Pritchard. He was a player that was not nearly getting the same notoriety as he was or as he is this season and after that championship run. But he was able to gain that heat, and we knew that he was an offensive threat throughout the regular season. Did we know that he was a sixth man of the year type of candidate? I don't believe so.
Well,
There.
you did.
Oh yeah, I
Yeah,
said that.
don't sell yourself short. You go,
I
no,
said
you believed he was a sixth man of the year candidate. Nobody else did. We got to pull up the receipts from, was it the second game or the first game of the
it was.
preseason?
We were in Abu Dhabi.
Yeah,
I said
it's the
that in Abu
Nuggets.
Dhabi. So wanna know what? I will take that point. I was trying to play it a little humble, but yeah,
No,
I
see, you can't play it humble out here in the media game. You gotta kind of assert yourself in terms of like, no, I predicted this. I mean, Rob last year, we all have our predictions. Like, I have my Grant Williams take in 2021, and then he saves us in Game 7 in 2022. You have Peyton Pritchard, sixth man of the year. Rob has the Dallas Mavericks last year. We all have our takes where we're just spot on, months ahead of time, years ahead of time, to a point that seems impossible and nobody else sees. But then when we give it out, that's why, it's important to kind of advertise ourselves
you
like
know
that, to
what?
give ourselves credibility for the people.
And that's why these three viewers right now are tuned into the best Celtics podcast in on the market right now. We're not here to rage bait. Yeah, we're not gonna tell you some fluff. We're gonna give it to you straight up. And wanna know what? Some of our shots go in, some of them don't. But when we do make our shots, they look pretty damn good. And my take
Truth.
on Peyton Pritchard was spot on, especially after that playoff run, that finals run. That obviously carried over into this season. And like I said, that confidence has been above a million for Peyton Pritchard. So now he's someone that is written down on whiteboards for other teams. They're like, okay, once that 6th minute in the first quarter rolls around, they're going to have that number along to the court, and that's going to change up what they're doing completely on the offensive end. And he's also not something that we can take advantage of on the defensive end. So let's make some notes for what we're going to do when it comes down to playing him. And who knows who that next player is for the Boston Celtics? We're going to probably see like players like Torrey Craig start to play a lot more, start to, who knows, become a little bit.
Above 30. Above 30. It's like, I don't know if we're going to see him past the season considering the minutes he's getting right now. I don't know about that.
Well, I'm talking about going into playoffs. I think he's going to be a player that you can almost put in at the same confidence level as you would feel putting in a Sam Hauser, especially because of his versatility and the way he can play down low, be able to match up in the paint against the 4 or 5, and be able to box out, which is why we brought him in. It's the difference in his game compared to Sam Hauser's that will be able to be utilized. But yeah, just to be, it's it's just all momentum when it comes to this team, and that's really all you can get out of these guys. And players like Tatum, Brown, obviously, you want to keep them playing at a consistent level. Kristaps Porzingis, you want him to get acclimated as he's tonight's player spotlight after returning from his viral illness. That is a tall hill for this Boston Celtics team, and is a very green flag for them as they move forward. If you're getting Kristaps Porzingis coming back after missing multiple games and to be shooting 9 for 16 as a clip, that's a very great sign. And don't force it. Don't bite the hand that's feeding you. You just need to continue to really throw out these games and have those hopes that you can find some altered star power. I mean, Derek White, when he steps up and has his high scoring performances, those are something that you can't take for granted. Even Drew Holiday last game being able to step up and have a season high at this point of the season, game 67 that was on the season. Him to hit his season high at game 67 of the year, that only means he's going to be playing at that level during playoffs.
Yeah, and you mentioned Peyton Pritchard in there. I want to mention one more thing before closing off this show tonight. And I mentioned it earlier, but I'm going to mention it with you on the broadcast as well. Peyton Pritchard sets the NBA record tonight for most threes made by a player off the bench in a single season. And I believe the number was 219, if I'm not mistaken. 219. That sounds about right there. 219, 319. Regardless. Set the NBA record. Made NBA history tonight. Peyton Pritchard did, going 5 of 8 from 3. One of those 5 3-pointers was the historic mark of the most 3-pointers made by a player off the bench in an NBA season. Peyton Pritchard surely has sent in his what do you say, ballot? I don't know what you want to say there. So Peyton Pritchard has certainly sent in the validation for him to be 6th man of the year this season, scoring the most 3-point makes off the bench by any player in NBA history. Peyton Pritchard is the one who holds that title, and there's still 14 games left in the season for Pritchard to put more points and put more 3-point shots and 3-point makes up on that record. So Pritchard beating that record with some absurd time left in the season, 14 games to be exact left in the season. But regardless, we will have you guys covered for all 14 games going down the stretch for the Celtics in the regular season. We will also have you guys covered for the NBA playoffs here on the Celtics Talk Weekly post-game show. But for tonight, that is going to do it for us here on the Celtics Nets post-game. The Celtics, of course, beating the Brooklyn Nets 115-113. Kristaps Porzingis, our player spotlight tonight, 24 points on the night in his return from missing 9 of the last 10 games. Kristaps was huge in this game. 3 players with the Celtics, Tatum, Porzingis, Peyton Pritchard, all scoring 20 points tonight. 6 players in total in double figures. The Celtics go into Brooklyn, win a game that wasn't pretty throughout, but was mostly, it was handled by the Boston Celtics. You could certainly say that. The Celtics had the handle on this game. But moving forward, we hope the Celtics will have a handle on many more games moving forward within the schedule. 14 games left. We will have you guys covered here on the Celtics Talk Weekly post-game show for every single one of them. But that's going to do it for us tonight. As I always say, thank you all for listening. I am your host, Seamus Zarlingo, alongside of me, Nick Franco. And of course,
looking like the Celtics.
You looking like a Peaky Blinder out here. That's what you look like. That's what you look like, Franco. A Peaky Blinder right now.
Right out of Dorchester. Like. I was in Somerville tonight.
That explains it. Go Seas, folks. Go Seas.